Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 10th webinar session titled Understanding Heritage Through Ethical Tourism. I am Aksa, and I'm the project coordinator for Pakistan Chowk Community Center. Before we start, I would like to introduce Pakistan Chowk Community Center very briefly. PCC is a digital space for promoting arts and culture and pressing questions of built environment and urban complexities. Under PCC, we have projects that focus on mapping and oral history, as well as we conduct heritage walks in Karachi. I would also like to introduce Plus 921 Heritage Talks, which is a project of Pakistan Chowk Community Center. Under Plus 921 Heritage Talks, we plan to host discussions and webinars every 6 months dedicated to discussing the politics of heritage and preservation in Pakistan. Must take into account the local context. In a rapidly changing world, narratives around heritage preservation are shaped by a plethora of relatively new factors. The parameters of what constitutes heritage are expanding and take into account not just the past and tangible heritage sites, but our present as well as our current relationship with the spaces we inhabit as communities. We have our guest for tonight is Zain Mustafa. I think anyone who is familiar with tourism, ecotourism, heritage, or anything of that sort in Pakistan probably knows the name already. But before we introduce our guests, I would like to read out the abstract for our talk tonight. And then we'll move to my colleague Huzaifa, who will introduce the guest, and then Zain will start with his presentation. Understanding heritage through ethical tourism. Preservation of heritage sites demands foremost an acknowledgement of its existence and a sense of belonging and ownership among those who claim to inherited it as the basis for any substantial conservation work. Areas where official institutions have lacked in properly educating the public, individuals have arisen to provide alternatives like education-oriented tourism. Educational tours and a collaborative approach that involves local indigenous communities which live in and around the heritage sites can be considered as an alternative to commercial models of tourism. Instead of commercial consumption, can ethical tourism become a dissemination point for cultural knowledge, mobilize communities in this regard, and by doing so, push regulatory bodies to take better care of our heritage sites? Given the political leadership of Pakistan is busy in rebranding Pakistan, specifically Northern Pakistan, as a tourist attraction on the world scale, however, the fast tourism that is promoted here has shown its ugly consequences in the form of heavy littering in Northern Pakistan and the imbalance of power between the natives and the tourists that leads to it. Questions arise, like how can one weave together systems of sustainable tourism that aren't extractive, protect local systems of knowledge, are inclusive, and help us build a sustainable relationship with our heritage? Over to you, Huzaifa.
Assalamu alaikum. Tonight, the guest tonight for our seminar is Zain Mustafa. Zain Mustafa is an educationist and architect based in Islamabad. He is also the founder of IRV Indus River Valley Institute and Cube Editors, and unique heritage architecture education tourism initiative taking learning about bio-regional shared history to heritage sites across Pakistan. From 1995 to 2000, Zain taught at the Indus Valley School of Arts and Architecture. From 2010 to date, he has continued to explore Pakistan through editors and design projects like NIC Karachi. He is the president of the Society for the Protection of Animal Rights on the advisory board, Pakistan Community Chowk Center, and a trustee on the board for the Gujarat School.
Assalamu alaikum and greetings from chilly Islamabad. Thank you, Aksa. Thank you, Huzaifa, for that very, very elaborate introduction, very humbling. Thank you for all the guests who are joining us today. Of course, thanks to Pakistan Chowk Community Center for hosting these incredible talks. Much needed, much needed. And I think where I will start, before I share my screen, you've all been introduced to who I am, is this idea of ownership. I think ownership is really a thought that we should keep in mind throughout. I will come back to it multiple times through the day. So the Indus River Valley Institute is Pakistan's first culture and heritage think tank. You know, it's so interesting that when I started thinking about what it is that I do and why I do it, I was looking online to see who else was doing work like this. And I realized that for a country that has a history of over 7,000 years, we still don't have a think tank for our culture and heritage. Like Asa said, heritage is tangible and intangible, and it's not just architecture. I started my journey January 2012, so it's been over 10 years. And although it was a personal journey, to understand really a couple of things. All over the world, as I've traveled and I've lived and I've studied and worked, people have always asked me, where are you from? And I've asked myself the same question, where am I from? So this work, this initiative, this project really began to try and piece together the jigsaw puzzle of where I am from, what is my identity, and in doing that, find a reflective identity of where you are from and where we are from as a unit in an inclusive manner. Where are we from? What is our identity? How much of our identity has been lost in a certain kind of colonial writing of history? How much of it has been imperialized? And how much of our understanding of ourselves has been biased by global Western education curricula? So there was an unraveling and there's a piecing together of jigsaw puzzle, and then the Indus River Valley Institute was created after 10 years of collecting data from 50 destinations, from Nagar Pakar on the southeast border of Pakistan all the way to Kailash in the northwest. Today, I have the opportunity of sharing a few ideas for a few minutes of 10 years work across 50 completely diverse and rich and enigmatic and mysterious destinations of Pakistan in a very short span of time, understanding heritage through ethical tourism. Heritage is something that we need to take ownership of. And I don't mean that in a preaching manner. I mean that in a grounded manner, in a way to connect ourselves to our earth, connect ourselves to the Indus River. She has been Sindhu, Mother Sindhu, Indus, and then thereafter India. She is our India in many ways, and runs right across the country, connecting the ancient Silk Route through the mountains, through the Mariners Sea, through this Silk Route in the ocean, all the way from Africa to Russia and China to Portugal. So this is a vast history, deep, colorful, mysterious, magical history that we need to take ownership of in a very soulful manner. It's not just surface, not just Instagrammable, something that has to run in our bloods. And really, what we're talking about and what we're here to talk about in a shared idiom, in a shared platform, is bioregional history that we are all part of. Bioregional, I basically mean of the region's biology and its botany. So mountains, rivers, the geography, the geology, the climate plays a huge role in our heritage buildings, how they're built, why they're built, where they're built. We must understand ley lines, the energetic network underneath the footprint of these buildings. They're not just cakes on a base. So ownership of what we're talking about here is not just a material ownership of a piece of land or a date or an event. It's an ownership of a holistic experience. And understanding that is what we take our people, our explorers on these journeys of trying to understand this holistic experience of what heritage ownership is. And I'll show you a few pictures of how we do that. Ethics is about being honest. So for me, if we do this through the lens of ethical tourism, we're really looking at what is authentic, what is integrous, what is real, what is meaningful, what has depth, what has soul, and how is it that we can be included in it? Even though we're coming in as a tourist, you're coming into a host environment, you're coming into somebody else's space. How do we come into someone else's space with due respect, with sensitivity, with cultural appropriateness, and become one with it, and then go away from it and take from it only that is relevant to us, which is the connection, is a bloodline, cultural lineage connection to that particular moment in time when we were there. So this is a very complex and layered, sort of like the French millefeuille. It's a very sensitive, layered, fragile, aromatic environment to be treading in. And I think when we talk about the ethics of it, one has to be very, very gentle, very empathetic and compassionate to the sites, to their true custodians, the people who live there. They're not natives, they're locals. They may be indigenous, but a native is a term that we have inherited from the outside world. Just like primitive is not really appropriate in this age anyway. Nobody's primitive. And we want to go back to primal. So primal, primitive, natural, organic are all things that are no longer peripheral. They're no longer marginalized ideas. Native is a problematic term, and we need to move away from that. So this is the work that we've been doing for 10 years. To give you a quick walkthrough, that is the cover image for one of our social media sites. I think this is Facebook. Cube Editors, there's our logo. And there's myself teaching a bunch of students how to see. We go to these sites, there's a multiple set of ways of seeing any site. One of the things we do is we do drawings from within. I teach these students how to do expressionist drawings by seeing the site from their stomach, not their head, not their skill set, not their heart, but from someplace deeper, more motherly, more ingrained, more entrenched, more embodied. We want them to see it from an embodied space, a space that they were born with, knowledge they were born with, an ancient wisdom that runs in their blood. So here's a group of fashion students at Makli. Makli is one of the largest necropolises in the world, saints and kings. It's a straight line, 4 kilometers of 150,000 graves, 80 monuments, 4 different legacies and eras of people who have ruled the neighborhood. I mean, Makli is the most profound, rich environment that one could have started with. And this is where my journey began. My first discovery for who I was walking to Makli. And it was this tear-jerking reaction, thinking, my God, look at the condition of this place. Why are there not more people here? Why is there no signage, etc., etc.? It is absolutely magnificent, and there's no other way of looking at it. This picture has Jam Nizamdi's 14th century mausoleum behind me. We do charcoal drawings. At every site, when we have time, it doesn't matter if you can draw, you can't draw, because we're drawing from deep within. You're not drawing from your eyes, you're not drawing from your brains, you're drawing from someplace deeper. And we do these expressionist emotional drawings every site we go to where there's time. Relationship with the earth is very, very important to us. That's myself and my history teacher, history of architecture teacher, Jean Gardner, who came from the US, from New York, to see Pakistan. She spent 3 months with us here and realized, not only did she realize that what I was saying had been missed in my education, but even her education and the education that she gives to everyone else sitting at Parsons School of Design or at Columbia University or other colleagues of hers at similar places. So, and we go back, she and I went back to the earth. You have to go back to the earth. The earth has stories to tell. She has secrets we need to find out. She whispers stories that we often forget because we think it's not important because it's under our feet. It's extremely important what's under our feet. And there we are, we're sitting, the two of us climbed up, we left our shoes in our cars, we climbed up bare feet, cell to cell, from our souls to that of the cell of the desert. This is Sarfaranga Desert. It's the largest, highest cold desert in the world. Behind us are the Karakoram in the mountains in the background. You can see the cumulus clouds in the sky. This is a cold desert, and it's surrounded by the tallest peaks in the world. So for me, it's important to understand our relationship to the earth when we talk about heritage and heritage buildings. That's the first place to begin. On our tours, we create context. Once you've understood the relationship between you and the earth, you can look at this picture. Bashir is standing there with no shoes on. Najeeba is sitting there with no shoes on. You can't see others. None of us have shoes on. We've got the earth, the grass. This is Kaplu Palace in Skardu, 400 years old building. And I'm sitting there with maps. That map in front of me is basically one of 5 maps that we took to this particular site to look at the movement of the Silk Route, the people that came through, and what Marco Polo and his type of people were finding. What were they looking for? What were they discovering? What were they running into? The conversations, the dialogues, the dynamics of curated collisions of conversations on their journeys. Ancient maps. I pick up ancient maps and we sit down on the earth. We talk about it. We talk about what the maps are showing, who made the maps, what kind of information are in these ancient maps. And we take time to breathe, to feel the building before we go into it. So I'm very particular in terms of the ethics of tourism, to not just walk into a building like a bull in a china shop. You dress for it, you prepare for it, you meditate for it, you think about it, you talk about it, you prepare yourself for it, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, so that you can approach the building with respect that it deserves. You can get an authentic experience. You can stay integrous to yourself and get an integrous relationship going with the building. That's what we want, to build relationships. Otherwise, these buildings end up being mere backdrops to just phenomenal Instagram photos, and that's it. There's a lens of the camera, lens of the filter, lens of social media and global expectations of a new generation, and then we've lost the actual sound of the building. So we do all of this. This meeting sitting here probably took an hour before we even stepped into the Kaplu Palace, at which point we saw many groups had already come and gone. Again, you find me sitting down on the floor. This is Makli. We look at the details. So you looked at the context, which is mega. We look at micro. Micro, you go down to the kind of stone that's used, the type of tools that were used in calligraphy, in stone carvings. In this particular case, we're looking at the chamfered edges of the Tarkhan tombs with the calligraphy on it that if you look at it carefully, it looks like it's been copy pasted. This is all handwork, and it's all been done hundreds of years ago. So we juggle mega, global, regional context with micro details of this nature. So you understand the depth of the texture and the scale of the texture that one is looking at in this kind of educational heritage tourism. And again, to be honest to it, to be honest to yourself, to be ethical, to be kind, to be empathetic, and to be respectful. Here, you see me talking about this, again, sitting down as close to the floor as possible. This happens to be in the main courtyard in the Kailash. The Kailash Valley, absolute northwest corner of Pakistan. They've been here in the mountains for centuries. Nobody talks about them. They're dwindling race, gorgeous pagan people at the northwest corner. The Greeks say they're part of us. The Southeast Asians, Aryans say they're part of us. Everybody has a need to connect. And when we go there, we're looking at these buildings. I'm talking about the buildings. We're talking about the cribbage, the moving architecture, the egg in their buildings, the use of rock, the use of wood, the use of lentils in their mud, in their plaster. Sitting next to us was this wonderful man who was listening, and he said, you know what? I have a song to sing for you guys because you're so interested in how we live. And he sat there and he sang us a song in Khwar, and then he told us a story about himself, his life. And these are really special moments. You cannot plan these. You cannot expect these to happen, but when they do happen, we shift gear, because then you're in the host, his space, in the host space, in their environment, in their time zone, and you put your urban needs, your urban planning, your scheduling aside and say, surrender. We're here to surrender to your history, to your home, to your stories. And that's what was captured here. Is the minute I finished my storytelling, this gentleman took over. Look at that. Storytellers, from one storyteller to another. This is Yusuf Saab, Husainabadi. He's an author, he's a writer, he's a teacher, taught English. He's an incredibly well-read, erudite man. Has this little museum where he's collecting things, artifacts. Each one of these objects in this picture with Faisal and Adila Suleiman standing there, each one of these objects, there's about, he said, I've 2,000 objects. They all have a story, where he found them, why he picked it up, what it means, how it's connected to the Balti culture. He's the only person who's written the first book on Gilgit-Baltistan's history. So you walk in there, you request for this man's time, he comes out and he gives you that. These are really meaningful stories, untold stories, people that hiding in the mountains that we have to go discover, and we do discover on our trips. These are the things that make the educational tours, at least for me, really, really interesting, where he's part of the fabric. This gentleman, the unexpected singing man in Kailash, these are sort of magical moments that I never planned from before. And how much time one spends there, one doesn't know. So yes, the building, yes, we look at the heritage buildings, we look at their architecture, their reason for being, etc. But these people we spend time with, because they have to be heard, their soul has to be heard, their stories have to be heard. And it has to be inclusive, right? This is the mausoleum for the Chachan Mosque in Kaplu. And here we are listening to his stories, how the mosque was built, who comes here, who doesn't come here, what are their rules and regulations, how do they live, what do they do for the communities? We want to meet the community. So here, the gentleman says, my community is, our community is, you are welcome to be a part of this community. So again, we have a huge amount of time that's spent on connecting not only to the land, but the people of the land, the building of the land, the communities, their stories, the philosophy, the spirituality. And it's all inclusive. None of it is ever pushed right, said, what if I don't believe in this, I'm not going to go experience it. We go experience it. Whether you believe it or not is a separate issue. This is all part of the education of learning what that land is about and how we can find our own reason to engage with it, to take ownership of it. This is what we're all doing here. We're spending time with this gentleman and taking ownership of the sound of his voice, the stories he's telling, the lyricism in his intonation. All of this is heritage, and it all belongs to us. Sometimes we get involved in here's one kind of bridge to cross. We are here in any case talking about different types of bridges we're crossing, connecting pieces, connecting time zones, connecting eras, connecting people, connecting stories, and making it our own. But here we are crossing a river, getting to understand this man who's in the right-hand photo, who does this all day. He moves that little cabin with this pulley system from one end to the other, basically taking people from ferrying people from one side to the other. And here's a youngster monk who said, Uncle Zan, I want to try as well. So I said, ask the gentleman. The gentleman was over the moon that somebody wanted to talk to him, to speak to him, to actually try his work. So we all had to go at it, and it was great fun. So this young man is going to grow up and remember this memory of being part of such a simple action, such a simple job that was on repeat for this gentleman. Naveed, I think his name was. And he did this all day, and this young boy is going to remember this when he grows through life, through college, through university, through his maybe corporate career, maybe not, who knows? But these are moments that are inexplainable. They're authentic, they're honest, they work with the community, they engage. And that's what we want. We want people to come back with this holistic experience of a completely immersive engagement with where they were and what they will take back with them in terms of the architecture of their memory of these heritage experiences. Who is the tourist in this picture? No one almost disappears into it. We try and do this. Clothing, really important. Being culturally conscious, not wandering around as if you're in high street Karachi, high street London, high street New York, high street Toronto. You come out of your costume and get into another skin, like the skin you have underneath. You take one skin off and you put on another skin that exudes respect, that exudes an attempt of saying, I want to come closer to you. I want to make an attachment. I want to have a cultural hug. I want to be able to give you some of my stories and takes and share these moments, find these moments. So here we have Victor sitting in the middle of all these polo players. They were practicing polo that afternoon. The Skardu Polo Festival is about to begin. We joined in. One of us had a ride on a horse. You can see he's making friends with the horse, making friends with the people. We come down out of our sort of distant, disassociated, urban, maybe over-traveled, maybe over-educated selves, and just let it all go and connect with the moment. Back to the Kailash, this is the Kailash Museum. Talk about connecting to the moment. Look at the expression of young Abbas sitting with his mother, learning how to string beads together. The Kailash women have beads in their headgear, down their front. They have very sensitive, very delicate cultures and rituals that non-ethical tourists come in and they just go nuts. They make noise, they misbehave, etc., etc. So here we're looking at sort of mega micro level, what these people are about, these women are about. There's a young man who went home and he said, Mama, I want to try this as well. Can we come back and do more? So we also connect with these people who we meet at a artisanal level, understanding the craft of their lives, the craft of their food, the craft of their clothing. So even just the entire lifestyle, not only just the craft of building that's standing behind me, but and the rose that was picked up from the garden and plucked into my headgear next to my Chitrali feather. But this level of detail of understanding people, their music, how the instruments are made, how their clothing is made, how they make their food, how they speak to each other, the language, all of it, it's all connected into what we really insist on doing, is showing respect to not putting these people anywhere you go in the country at a lower level to you, because you're the tourist and they're the host. We don't do that. We break down economic, social, cultural backgrounds. We connect, we engage, we find ways of diffusing our own walls and bringing our own architecture down to come closer to theirs. And it's amazing in how easily one can, with just a little bit of time, with a little bit of understanding, with the ability to listen to them, with the ability to see them from other cells of your body beyond just the eyes. It makes a huge difference. I guess that's the end of my ramble for today, but there's so much more that we can talk about in understanding heritage, making sure that we all play our role in ethical behavior, ethical tourism, avoiding vandalism, avoiding spoiling somebody else's space, being careful what you tread on, avoiding noise pollution, avoiding so many things. And there's so many things we can do to make sure that when we come to these places, many of them are in ruins. What can we do to keep this history alive? That's really the thought that I'd like to leave you all with, and for us to take about what can each of us do to visit these places in a kind, empathetic, ethical manner, and to build something with them to keep this history alive. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, the audience. That we can open this up to Q&A, if you guys think that's okay.
Hi, thank you, Zen. Thank you so much. This was an amazing presentation. The way you spoke about approaching these places with a sense of sensitivity, whether that's cultural or spiritual, when we approach these, not just these places, but also the communities, the way we interact with them, all of that is so much important, especially in a global culture where we like to think that the only model for tourism is what we see in, European capitals, and we should just copy paste that onto Pakistan, where it will not be sustainable, where it will probably be very, very dangerous for our local communities who have held these places together for so long without any help from anyone else. I have a question, or you could say even, I would like to get your remark or your observation on this. This is basically, in the past couple of years, you've probably noticed this yourself, that how in the name of tourism, we've been exoticizing, certain places or certain geographical regions in Pakistan. What happens as a result of that as a result of those exotic campaigns, visual campaigns that we see, which are also sometimes supported by the state, is that certain places start attracting more investments from major corporations who want to make 5-star hotels. The land prices go up and the local communities start feeling very, very threatened. So my question is, how do we make sure that when we are, you have touched upon this in your presentation as well, but if you can explain with more specific examples. This has been happening, I believe in Gilgit-Baltistan, also in, where people have been protesting for so long about their own basic rights. And land grab that also sometimes happens in the name of tourism or building 5-star hotels. So how do we make sure that tourism does not become a threat for the local communities and their rights of ownership? How do we find that balance? If you can just give your observation on that.
That's a very, very important question, Aksa. Thank you so much for really hitting on the need of the moment. Is the operations, the logistics. Two things have happened. One, there has been a mushrooming of poverty tourism, where a lot of people are wanting to go into, let's say, the north, like you suggested, for as low budget as possible. So obviously, to provide their needs, this barnacle-like hotel industry has developed. And that, of course, is, it's just building anything, anywhere, anytime one wants, as long as there's money to be given to the local landowner. And then there's the 5-star hotels and the 4-star hotels, the big boys that come into play, supported by sometimes international investors, to also exploit and insensitively use the locals, that backdrop for their photos, like I said, for Instagram and for their wedding photos, etc. We can continue ad nauseum, Aksa, to find reasons to critique. What is missing is a regularization. We don't have a strategy, a federal or provincial strategy or policy to regularize these things. One of the reasons, as I travel across the country, one of the reasons IRBI was created was to get involved in leading strategy and policy making and implementation systems, working with local leaders, local community, to actually figure out what are the barriers, what are the boundaries where one can go and cannot go in terms of investment. And of course, educating the tourist. Let's say you do build a hotel in a perfectly reasonable environment. Maybe there's not too many people. Maybe you're not disturbing there's no noise pollution. Maybe we're not disturbing people wandering around that are indigenous, but maybe they're leaving pollution behind, or they're leaving other sorts of tracks of their presence behind in an environment that nobody else locally is able to see, but it's still bad for the environment, bad for the ecology. So we look at the ecotourist side of it. Whichever way you want to come at your question, until we don't start talking about strategy, policy, and implementation, and bring law and order into it, all of these things are going to continue happening, and they've already been happening because the tourism industry has grown so quickly. So there hasn't been time really in an organic manner to say, wait, time out. We want the money, we want the investment, we want all of you to go travel, we want people coming from the outside world, no doubt. Pakistan has so much to offer beyond the mountains, but it has to be done in the right way. We have to create a structure for the language of tourism.
For answering my question. Thank you so much. And you have explained it very, very well. Huzafa, do you have a question to ask?
You did touch upon this in like this question right now, that how the governments should, even provincial governments should focus on developing tourism in such a way that it properly benefits the locals. I also had a question on what kind of things you would suggest to tourist companies themselves, that they can, in a way, when they are getting the benefit of experiencing a different culture, they can also provide a benefit to the locals in a more material sense. What kind of ways would you say would help benefit? What kind of things heritage companies or tourist companies can do that can benefit the locals in a more material way?
Wonderful question, Zeppa. Thank you. So I've noticed that a lot of commercial tourist agencies will come with a group of people, and they will want to eat. One second. They will want to eat the same food that they would eat in their cities. So they want to eat chicken kadai and they want to eat biryani, but you're in Malam Jabba or you're in the Kailash. So I would suggest that the tourist agencies should first of all come and speak to me. So I can give you a list of all the treasures in food, in cuisine, in clothing, instead of going there and buying the same branded t-shirt that you can buy in your equivalent of Zinda Market or Marvi Mazhar in Karachi or wherever. They should support the local economy, buy the local food, buy from the local craftsmen, find reasons to employ locals, go and spend time with them, eat in their homes, provide them with an extra economy. This intangible sort of casual economy can really help develop them. Pay for their singers. Don't bring your DJs from the city and put up these raves in the middle of the mountains. That's entirely inappropriate. You can do that in the city anyway. There's these events that happen at Ranikote Fort, and it's just mind-boggling that why would one want to come and do this here, which you can do in an open plot in any of our big urban cities. So they ignore. I think the tourist companies should be told that engage the locals, find the folk singers, even if it's not fancy folk singers, just the local singer. So involve them. Let them feel like they're being seen. Right now, like Aksa said, people come and they exotify us. They don't see these people as real. They see them as sort of backdrops, as sets for their pictures, for their family photos. There's so much awful music that I hear playing there instead of the local music. And in the cars, when we're with our drivers, we tell them, please turn off anything that you think we want to listen to. We want to listen to what you're listening to when we're not here. Play that. And I've come back with thousands of songs from Balochistan, from Gilgit-Baltistan, local music, and they love it. If you say, we want to listen to what you listen to, please take us to your homes. We want to eat your food. No, I don't want chicken kadhai. I don't want biryani. So all the things that the tourist that comes in, they should be encouraged by their company, whoever it is, that please, let's build a local economy. Each of us can give back to the local economy. And this is the way to do it. Buy their crafts, buy their food, go shopping in their bazaars, buy the raw materials that they would eat, the spices, the nuts, the dry fruit, whatever it may be, the coal for your shisha. I don't know. Does that help, Huzefa? Does that answer your question, kind of?
I guess it does, because that was a very interesting take, especially on the music part, where you spoke about getting involved on a very, very basic level. Cultural exchange should happen on a very basic level, and food and music are two very important cultural markers, which we sometimes just want to ignore, and we just want to go for the beautiful sights and the props. I believe an audience member has a question. Mariam, would you like to open up your mic and ask your question?
Yes, thank you, Aksa, and thank you, Zan, for your very thoughtful and interesting presentation. My question sort of builds off of the last question, which is, so you've talked a little bit about how we can engage the community and get, bring material benefit to the community that we visit as tourists. The thing that I think about is the tour guides themselves, the kind of considerate, ethical, sort of immersive experience that you have outlined is not really possible for for most tour guides out there, right? Because as I've seen in my professional and personal capacity, a lot of tour guides, unfortunately, either have no background in the areas that they take people in, or they sometimes even have incorrect information. We're starting at a very basic level where they simply don't know. Because they've never had an opportunity to learn, so they see an economic opportunity, they take it, and we're a long way off from your brand of ethical tourism becoming the mainstream. But do you have any thoughts on what can be done to sort of bridge that divide between what we see in the mainstream and what we want it to become, ideally?
Thank you, Mariam, for another complicated question. That I think about this all the time, is that what can one do to raise the level of our tour guides? They're doing, a lot of our tour guides, Mariam, are people who are fond of traveling. They're fond of leaving their cities, they're fond of road trips, they're fond of hiking, mounting, they're fond of adventure, they're fond of meeting new people. But they don't have the skill set of really understanding that art conversation. is once they're there, they're like, okay, now what do I do? And their school hasn't taught them. We don't have a tourism subject that's taken pretty seriously in any of our curriculums. And I think that these youngsters, a lot of them are youngsters that are sort of running around the country saying, look at this, look at this, look at how cool is that? They go as far as how cool is that? And then they stop, right? They say, okay, now what? And there's a huge gap between what we do and what everybody else is doing. And I keep telling anyone I have a chance to meet that if you want to go into this industry, if you have a following, if you have a bunch of people who are listening to you, if you're a vlogger and you're a well-known blogger, you have a responsibility to your audience, those that are not traveling with you, they're on the digital space, that please come to me, take some information and hand it out, because there's got to be some small percentage in that 100,000, 500,000, 1 million audience that would be interested in these details, this cultural exchange that Aksa highlighted. So we need to create programs, workshops, courses at schools, at colleges, so private and public, government schools and others, to give these tour guides some basic, Mariam, what will they teach? What will they do? Look at what our history teaches us. It's not the tour guide's fault that he or she has nothing to say. Look at what they're taught in terms of history and geography and cultural connections. He just doesn't have the information. So, of course, we're not expecting any of these people to have the kind of information I have, but I'm happy to share as much as anybody wants. The IRBI website has been created for this purpose. It's a resource center for all of this information. I just need someone to come in and say, give me this information, and I'll be very happy to hand it out. We're working right now, I'm not sure if you, maybe you'll appreciate this. We're working right now on a 2-month tour guide training program. It's been shared with some folks in Sindh at government level and say, let's start this program. So at least at provincial level, we're saying, I have the information, I have the data. As we go to each of these sites, we make books. Not only are the books that I take to read from, but also books that each person gets. We have our own guidebook series that every traveler with us gets, that's history on that site. So anybody wanting to come into this business, the tour guide can just pick up one of our books, sit down with me for a short amount of time and say, look, here are the salient features. This is what you want to talk about, from pollution to history, from music to food, from people and their body language, privacy, public, noise, walking too close, too far, etc., etc. The tour guides just don't know. So unless we start creating platforms and courses and workshops where they can come and say, please give me this information. You know, that first picture that I opened my presentation was Jean and myself on Sarfaranga sand dune. After our group, there was a group of boys that came in their Jeep, in their open top Jeep. And we were watching them. And I told Jean, I said, you know, under normal conditions, they would have either driven the Jeep up or they would have gotten off the Jeep because of fear that it would get stuck, and then climbed up the mountain, climbed up the dune in their shoes. We had left our shoes at the bottom of the dune in a line. These boys got out, they turned the music off, they turned the car's engine off. They realized that we were here to enjoy the silence. They took their shoes off, Mariam, and they laid their shoes in a line. Imagine, shoes in a line next to our shoes, and they climbed up quietly. So, and we all talked about it afterwards, that this is unusual behavior. But it was brilliant because they learned something new. And they learned by seeing us, by our actions. So the tour guides out there, they need information, they need help. They're intelligent, they're energetic, they've got great ideas. Niyat bilkul saaf hai, as they say. They're good kids. They just need the information.
Thank you for that. And I best of luck with your venture in Sindh with the training for tour guides. And I look forward to seeing how that can hopefully be scaled up to the entire province and in other parts of the country, because we desperately need that.
Yes. Thank you, for sure.
Thank you so much for asking that question, Mariam, and Zan for answering that. Do we have any more audience members who would like to ask questions?
I'm trying really hard. Hello, everyone.
Hi, Farah.
And the context of what I'm going to say is that I am trying really hard to come up with a question. I joined the Zoom meeting earlier for everyone who wasn't here, and I said that I will ask a question, and I can't come up with one. But I think first the acknowledgement, Zen, thank you for doing what you're doing. There's just such a lack of sense of pride. But my question is, how can I help in any way in terms of research or any sort of support? No, my question is, will this get into a coffee book? Will you design a coffee book with all that's also happening? Because I think the tour guide, pamphlet, or book, whatever you're saying, is so brilliant. But can we document this anywhere else as well?
So there's a publishing house that has approached me to say, can we please compile all of your guidebooks? Some of those guidebooks are 50 pages. Some of those guidebooks are 150 pages. So, and they've been, over the years, they've been watching me. You know, I don't really plan that far ahead. I just sort of like listen and I do it. So now the publishing house has approached me and said, listen, young man, we've been watching you do this for a while. Can you think about a coffee book? Exactly what you've just said. Can we put all these things together and make them accessible to the public? I am all about accessing the public. I want all this material to be given over to the public. It belongs to them. It doesn't belong to me. I'm not taking this into my next life with me. It has to go out to all of you. So long story short, to answer your question, yes, it's in the pipeline. It'll be, Farah, it's what I want to do is I'd love to have our own version of a contemporary for the digital generation, our own Lonely Planet, but actually have it be cooler.
Okay, and that actually leads me to another question. See, now I
Great.
have all these questions. My second question is there anyone apart from you working on this? So is there another narrative that might get created?
Another narrative?
Yeah, is there
In what
anyone
sense?
else doing similar work that, I mean, there's a Zen Mustafa version of a book and documenting history. Is there anybody else working on something similar?
I wouldn't say something similar. I wish there was someone that I could say was copying it, but there are parallel and extremely valuable other initiatives. There's what the Wall City Lahore is doing with their day tours, night tours. There's what Heritage Walk Karachi does. There's Auntie Shaheen. There's what Pakistan Chowk Community Center started off doing with Marvi. There's Pindi Heritage Tours. I mean, I'm doing all this like free advertising for these people. There's a handful of us.
Amazing.
It's not enough. It's not enough. It's certainly not enough across the board. There's a handful only. And for instance, you know, our museums, any of these heritage sites, if you think of them as museums, none of them have education programs. So that would be another place to begin, is that actually start to install education programs at each of our museums, so that this narrative that you're talking about is also not only disseminated, but also shared, and people can plug in and contribute their own input. Right now, if there's 5 or 6 people I mentioned, each one is doing their own work in their own silos, which I think needs to stop. We need to start coming together and working together, doing collaborative programs, and building something, you know, that's a unit and has a holistic feel, so that it can answer your question of what is the sort of unilateral narrative. But at the moment, there isn't anybody doing this, what I do, but they're doing excellent work in their own versions of this narrative.
That's amazing. Thank you. I had no idea there were so many people doing such great work. I'm sorry for my ignorance, and thank you for the time.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Zen, for joining us today. This was a wonderful webinar, very, very interesting. And thank you for sharing all your knowledge and insights and experiences with us. I completely enjoyed it. And thanks to our audience for being so interactive. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Aksa. Thank you, Pakistan Chowk Community Center. Thank you, Huzaifah. Thank you for this wonderful audience. Take ownership of your heritage, please, everyone. That's one thing I'd like to leave home with everyone. Take ownership of your heritage.